My father shoved me toward the door with my newborn crying in my arms and snarled, "You made your bed, now lie in it." That night I left with nothing but a baby blanket and a sliver of hope. Years of silence followed. When they finally showed up expecting to find me broken, what I revealed made their hands shake. It's chilling really how one choice can shatter your entire world, leaving you utterly alone. My parents thought they were teaching me a lesson when they threw me out at 18 with my 3-day-old baby, and for years they told everyone I just moved away for college. But the real lesson? That came 3 years later, when they showed up on my doorstep, desperate and broken, begging for help with a secret I was about to expose. A secret hidden in the dusty basement of our old family business that changed everything and nothing all at once. The night my life imploded started with my father's hands trembling. Not from age, but from a rage so raw it felt like it vibrated through the entire kitchen. My mother stood behind him, silent, yet her quiet was louder than any scream. I clutched my tiny 3-day-old son against my chest, his heart fluttering against mine like a trapped bird. "Get out," my father spat, his voice a low growl I barely heard over Ethan's whimper. "Get out of my house." His house. I remember thinking how strange that sounded. Just last Christmas he called it our home. The kitchen where I learned to bake Grandma's apple pie, where Jacob and I carved pumpkins, where Mom taught me to fold dumplings. It all suddenly belonged to someone else. "Dad, please," I whispered, pulling the thin receiving blanket tighter around my baby. "Just one night. I'll figure something out tomorrow, I promise." He slammed his hand on the table, the chair scraping back as he stood. "You should have thought about that before," he snarled, and I instinctively recoiled, my hip hitting the counter. "Before you spread your legs for that boy, before you brought shame into this house, before you decided to keep it." The word, "it," hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. My son stirred, his perfect little fingers curling and uncurling against my chest. He wasn't an it. He was mine. He was everything. And he was only 3 days old. My mother finally spoke, her voice thin, papery. "Richard, maybe we should." "No." He cut her off with a vicious slash of his hand. "We gave her choices. We offered to send her away to adoption. She made her choice. Now she lives with it." His eyes, the same hazel as mine, looked at me like I was a stranger. The irony burned. They'd raised me to believe in forgiveness, in family, in second chances. Every Sunday for 18 years, we'd sat in the third pew at Riverside Baptist, my father's booming voice leading hymns about grace. But grace, it seemed, had limits. And I had crossed them. "Mom," I pleaded, searching her face for something, anything. She was gripping the back of Dad's chair, knuckles white, mouth a tight, painful line. "Mom, please. He's your grandson." She closed her eyes. That was her answer. My father moved towards me, and for a wild moment I thought he might hit me. He never had. But he'd never looked at me like this either. Like I was something diseased, needing to be cut away. Instead he reached past me, grabbed my purse from the counter, and shoved it into my free hand. "You have 5 minutes to get whatever you can carry. Then you leave. Don't come back." I stood frozen. The weight of my son suddenly unbearable. This couldn't be happening. My parents didn't do this. Not the people who drove 3 hours to every volleyball game, who threw me a graduation party, who cried when I got my college acceptance. "For minutes," my father announced, checking his watch. I stumbled upstairs, my body on autopilot, my mind screaming. My room still decorated with prom photos, my acceptance letter pinned to the bulletin board. The mobile mom helped me hang over the secondhand crib. It looked like a museum of a different girl's life. I grabbed the diaper bag I'd packed for the hospital, shoved in whatever clothes I could reach with one hand, holding Ethan with the other. My hand shook so badly I dropped things twice. From the hallway I heard light footsteps. Jacob, my 12-year-old brother, appeared in the doorway, his face streaked with tears. "Haley, don't go," he whispered, glancing back towards the stairs. "I'll talk to them." No. I pulled him into an awkward one-armed hug, breathing in the familiar scent of bubblegum and basketball practice. "It's not your fault. This isn't on you." "But where will you go?" he asked, his voice breaking. I didn't have an answer. The boy who swore he loved me, who whispered promises in the backseat of his car, who said we'd figure it out together, he'd blocked my number the day I told him the test was positive. His parents had money, lawyers, threats. Mine had disappointment. And now abandonment. "I'll be okay," I lied, kissing the top of his head. "Take care of yourself, all right? Do your homework. Make the basketball team. Time's up." My father's voice boomed from downstairs. Jacob grabbed my free hand. "I love you," he choked out. "I'll find you when I'm older. I promise." I wanted to tell him not to promise things he couldn't control, but I desperately needed to believe someone in my family still loved me. So I just squeezed his hand and headed downstairs. My parents stood by the front door like sentinels. My father held it open, letting in the biting November cold. Neighbors' porch lights flickered on, curtains twitched. The Hendersons were definitely watching. Mrs. Chin next door pretended to check her mail at 9:30 at night. "Please," I tried one last time, my son starting that desperate, world-ending newborn wail. "Just until morning." I'll sleep in the garage. I won't. My father grabbed my elbow and guided me firmly towards the door. Not roughly, but with the same determined force he'd used to teach me to ride a bike, to push me forward when I was afraid. Only now he was pushing me away. The cold hit like a physical blow. I'd forgotten a coat. That receiving blanket was meant for a climate-controlled hospital, not a Michigan November night. Ethan's cries got louder, more desperate. You did this to yourself, my father said. And then the door closed. I heard the deadbolt turn, a sound that would echo in my nightmares for years. I stood on that porch where I'd had my first kiss, where I'd posed for prom photos, where we'd hung Christmas lights. My feet were in fuzzy socks from the hospital. No shoes. The diaper bag cut into my shoulder. My son's cries were drawing more attention. Mrs. Chin had pulled out her phone. Pride screamed at me to walk away with my head high, but survival whispered, try one more thing. I went to Jacob's window. His light was on. I saw his shadow. He pressed his palm against the glass, and I pressed mine against the other side. The cold window between us, like a prophecy of all the distances to come. Then I started walking. The sidewalk was rough under my socks, and within a block I could feel them tearing. Ethan's cries had shifted to hiccups and whimpers, exhausted from the effort. I didn't know where I was going. My best friend Sarah was away at college. The other girls from school, who'd promised a baby shower before they found out I was keeping him, before they started calling me stupid, and worse, they weren't options. By the time I reached the gas station 6 blocks away, my feet were bleeding. The fluorescent lights inside were harsh, violent after the darkness. The cashier, a middle-aged woman named Brenda with kind eyes, looked up from her magazine. Honey, you okay? She came around the counter, taking in my bloody socks, my crying baby, my everything on in one bag appearance. You need me to call someone? Can I? My voice cracked. Can I just sit for a minute? Warm up. She guided me to a plastic chair behind the counter, poured me coffee I didn't ask for, and pretended not to notice when I started crying. She gave me a pair of flip-flops from the lost and found in a candy bar I tried to refuse. I got kids, she said simply. I know that look. You got anywhere to go. I thought about lying, but I was too tired. No, she wrote something on a receipt paper. There's a shelter for young mothers about 3 miles from here. Martha's Haven. They don't turn anyone away. She paused, studying my face. You're the Richardson girl, aren't you? I remember you from when you'd come in for slushies. I nodded, shame burning through me. Everyone would know by tomorrow. Small towns don't keep secrets. Your daddy's a fool, Brenda said quietly. That baby needs his mama, and mamas need help. Ain't no shame in that. I stayed until her shift ended at midnight, feeding Ethan formula I'd packed, changing him on the bathroom counter, trying to figure out how to be a mother when I'd barely figured out how to be an adult. When Brenda locked up, she offered to drive me to the shelter. I couldn't accept. I'd already received more kindness from strangers than my own family. I told her I'd walk. The 3 miles felt like 30. Ethan slept finally, his weight growing heavier with each step. I sang to him softly, the lullabies my grandmother had sung to me before she died when I was 15. Back when I thought the worst thing that could happen was losing her. I found a park around mile 2 and collapsed on a bench, pulling my knees up to create a windbreak for my baby. The stars were out, brilliant and cold, and I remembered learning their names in earth science class just last year, back when I cared about things like constellation patterns and college applications and whether Bradchin would ask me to homecoming. It's just you and me now, I whispered to Ethan, his face peaceful in sleep. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be enough for you. But I promise I'll never leave you. Never. A police car drove by slowly and I tensed, but it kept going. I must have looked exactly what I was. A desperate teenage mother with nowhere to go. Not worth stopping for. Dawn was starting to lighten the sky when I finally saw the shelter. It was a converted Victorian house with a sign that read, Martha's Haven. A safe place for mothers and children. The paint was peeling, one shutter hung crooked, but the porch light was on. Welcoming. I stood at the bottom of the steps for a long time. My son started to stir again, probably hungry. Walking up those steps meant admitting what I'd become. It meant paperwork and caseworkers and questions I didn't want to answer. It meant being another statistic, another cautionary tale parents would whisper about to their daughters. But it also meant walls and a roof and maybe a bed where I could feed my son without freezing. I climbed the steps and rang the doorbell. The woman who answered the door had the kind of face that had seen everything and judged nothing. Her name was Deb, and she wore pajama pants with cartoon cats and a sweatshirt that read, World's Okayest Mom. She took one look at me. Bloody socks visible through the borrowed flip-flops, baby clutched against my chest, everything I owned in a Target bag, and stepped aside. Come on in, sweetheart. Let's get you sorted. The house smelled like disinfectant and desperation, with an underlying note of curry from someone's dinner. My empty stomach clenched. The entry hall was narrow, painted a cheerful yellow that couldn't quite hide the water stains on the ceiling. A bulletin board covered in rules, schedules, and inspirational quotes dominated one wall. Every journey begins with a single step, proclaimed one poster, which felt like a cruel joke when my journey had begun with being thrown out. Deb led me to an office the size of a closet where she pulled out a clipboard thick with forms. I know it's a lot, she said, producing a pen from behind her ear. But the state requires all this. Can you write while holding him? Or do you want me to hold? I've got him, I said quickly, adjusting Ethan so I could write one-handed. I'd learned in 3 days that I could do almost anything one-handed now. The forms wanted everything. My name, my parents' names, my son's father's name, medical history, income none, assets none, emergency contacts. I left it blank. Each question felt like another small humiliation, reducing my life to checkboxes and blank lines. How old is he? Deb asked gently, nodding at Ethan. 3 days. Her eyebrows rose slightly. And you're just coming from the hospital? From my parents' house. I couldn't finish. Ah. She didn't need me to. Well, you're here now. That's what matters. She explained the rules while I filled out papers. Curfew at 9 p.m. unless you had a work exemption. Mandatory chores rotated weekly. Group therapy twice a week. Parenting classes on Saturdays. No male visitors above the first floor. No alcohol, no drugs, random room searches. You could stay up to 2 years, but most moved on within 6 months, either up or out. She didn't specify which. You'll be sharing a room with Kesha and her daughter, Deb said, leading me upstairs. She's been here 3 months, knows the ropes. She's good people. The room was barely bigger than my walk-in closet at home. At my parents' house, I corrected myself. 2 twin beds pushed against opposite walls, a crib wedged between them, and a pack-and-play in the corner. A single dresser with 4 drawers, 2 for each mother. 1 window with bars on the outside, painted white, as if that made them less prison-like. Kesha was sitting on one bed, nursing a baby who looked about 6 months old. She was maybe 20, with intricate braids and tired eyes that sized me up in seconds. Fresh meat, she said, not unkindly. You look like you just got kicked out. Let me guess. Religious parents. I nodded, setting down my bag. Mine too. Apparently, having a baby without a husband is fine when Mary does it, but not when Kesha does it. She shifted her daughter to her other breast. That bed's yours. Bottom 2 drawers. There's a mini fridge in the hall we all share. Label everything or it'll disappear. Shower schedule's on the door. You get 10 minutes max. Your baby cry a lot. I don't know yet, I admitted. You will. She studied my son, who was starting to fuss. He hungry? Probably. There's a rocking chair in the common room. Better than trying to nurse sitting on these beds. They squeak like hell, and Marie next door will bang on the wall. I wanted to tell her I wasn't nursing, that my milk hadn't even come in properly before everything fell apart, that I had 6 cans of formula in my bag and no idea how I'd get more when they ran out. But shame kept me quiet. The next few days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and adjustment. My son. I'd named him Ethan at the hospital, alone except for a tired nurse who acted as my witness, cried constantly. Not the normal newborn crying the parenting books described, but a desperate, gasping wail that went on for hours. The other mothers in the shelter were patient at first, then less so. Can't you shut him up? Marie hissed through the wall at 3 a.m. on my 4th night. Some of us have to work in the morning. I wanted to scream back that I was trying, that I'd walked him up and down the narrow hallway until my feet bled again, that I'd tried everything, feeding, changing, swaddling, singing. But I just whispered, sorry, and took him down to the common room where I sat in the broken rocking chair and cried along with him. That's where Carla found me. She was 19, with bleached hair showing dark roots and a face that might have been pretty if it wasn't so gaunt. Her son Tyler was 8 months old and slept like a dream, she said, which made the other mothers hate her a little. First baby? She asked, sitting on the arm of the couch. Is it that obvious? You've got that look like you're drowning but don't want to admit you can't swim. She pulled a cigarette from behind her ear. Noticed my look and put it back. Not allowed to smoke in here anyway. Been trying to quit. Tyler's dad used to blow smoke right in my face when I was pregnant, so I figure secondhand's better than firsthand, right? She told me her story in pieces over the next few weeks. Her boyfriend had seemed sweet at first, then controlling, then violent. She'd stayed through the first 2, left after he'd pushed her down the stairs at 7 months pregnant. Her parents said she'd made her bed by dating that kind of boy. His parents had money and lawyers. Hers had disappointment and denial. At least your kid's dad just disappeared, she said one morning as we did our assigned kitchen duty. Mine keeps trying to get custody. Shows up here sometimes, makes a scene. Deb calls the cops. He leaves. Comes back a month later like a really shitty boomerang. The shelter had 22 mothers and 31 children at capacity, which we usually were. Some had stories like mine. Good families who couldn't handle the shame. Others had stories like Carla's. Bad relationships they barely escaped. Some had stories they didn't tell, that lived in the haunted looks they'd get when certain topics came up. There was Antonia, 16, with twins, who did her homework at the kitchen table while breastfeeding. Madison, 23, with 3 kids from 3 different fathers, who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford an apartment. Beth, 18 like me, whose baby was born addicted and cried even more than Ethan. We were all different races, different backgrounds, different stories, but we shared the same exhausted desperation. The same hollow look of women who'd been told we weren't worth keeping. The parenting classes were held in the basement on Saturday mornings. A volunteer named Patricia, who wore pearls to teach teenage mothers how to change diapers, would demonstrate proper burping techniques on a doll while we sat in metal folding chairs, babies on our laps or in borrowed carriers. She meant well, but her constant cheerfulness grated. "Remember, ladies," she chirped, demonstrating how to properly swaddle. "Babies can sense your stress. A calm mother means a calm baby." Beth snorted. "My baby was born with meth in his system. Pretty sure my stress levels aren't his main problem." Patricia's smile faltered but held. "Well, every baby deserves a chance at a peaceful environment, regardless of their beginnings." I learned more from the other mothers than from Patricia. Kesha taught me the football hold for nursing. Even though I was formula feeding, the position helped with bottles too. Carla showed me how to make formula stretch an extra day by adding just a little more water. Not enough to hurt them, she swore. Just enough to make it to payday. Antonia, juggling her twins like a pro, demonstrated how to wear Ethan in a wrap made from a bedsheet while I did chores. But the real education came from watching them navigate the system. The shelter required us to be actively working toward independence, which meant job hunting. But where could you work when you had a newborn and no childcare? The shelter's daycare only operated Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and most minimum wage jobs wanted nights and weekends. The catch-22 made my head spin. I applied everywhere I could walk to, the grocery store, the pharmacy, fast food places. The conversations all went the same. "Are you available nights and weekends? I have a newborn. I can work days. We need flexibility. Thanks for coming in." One manager at a clothing store looked at Ethan, sleeping in his carrier, and said, "We can't have babies in the store during shifts." I wouldn't bring him to work. I just had to bring him to the interview because I understand, but we need someone reliable. Reliable? As if working while raising a baby alone wasn't the definition of reliability. After 2 weeks of rejections, I was sitting in the common room, Ethan finally sleeping after a 4-hour crying jag, when Deb came in with a flyer. "Night cleaning crew at the Baxter office complex. They're used to hiring from here. It's not pretty work, but it's work. You interested?" I looked at the hours, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. "But Ethan, we have emergency overnight childcare for working mothers. It's not ideal. You'll be exhausted. But it's a start." A start. Everything here was framed as a start, a step, a journey, as if we were all headed somewhere better instead of just trying not to sink. I got the job. My supervisor, Mrs. Harris, was a black woman in her 60s who walked with a slight limp and had a voice like gravel. She looked at Ethan, asleep in his carrier in the break room, and said, "How old?" 3 weeks. "And you're here." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I need the work." She assigned me to the 3rd floor. 6 office suites, 2 bathrooms, a break room. "You got 3 hours for this floor. Trash, vacuum, surfaces, bathrooms. Questions?" "No, ma'am." "Good. And leave the baby talk at home. You're here to work, not for sympathy." It was harsh but also a relief. Everyone at the shelter looked at me with pity. Mrs. Harris just saw another pair of hands to push 'em up. The work was hard. My body, still recovering from childbirth, protested every movement. I bled through pads, leaked milk I wasn't using, cried in the supply closet when no one was around. But every night, I cleaned those offices like my life depended on it, because it did. The overnight childcare was a room with 6 cribs and one exhausted worker named Gladys, who watched the babies of mothers who worked nights. I'd feed Ethan at 9:30, hand him to Gladys at 9:45, and try not to think about him crying for me while I scrubbed toilets. I'd pump in the bathroom on my break, dumping the milk because I couldn't keep it cold and couldn't bear to see it go to waste, but also couldn't bear to keep producing it when I couldn't use it. 3 weeks into the job, I was cleaning an executive's office when I noticed the books on a shelf. Business management, accounting principles, financial planning. During my break, instead of pumping, I sat in his chair and read. The numbers made sense in a way nothing else in my life did. Credits and debits, assets and liabilities. There was a logic to it, a balance that could be achieved. I started borrowing books, reading them during my breaks, taking notes on paper towels. When Mrs. Harris caught me one night, I thought I'd be fired. "What are you doing?" she asked, standing in the doorway. "I'm sorry. That's a $200 textbook. I wasn't stealing it. I was just reading." She walked over, looked at my paper towel notes, covered in pencil equations. "You understand this?" "Some of it. I'm trying to learn." She was quiet for a long moment. "My daughter's an accountant. Makes 6 figures. Has a house with a pool. I clean her office sometimes. Different building. She forgets that. Tells people her mom's retired." She looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time. "You want more than this?" "Yes." "Then take the damn book home. Bring it back when you're done." There's more where that came from. That night, walking back to the shelter at 6 a.m. with a borrowed accounting textbook in my bag, Ethan's weight in my arms, the sunrise turning the sky pink, I thought about my parents. Were they awake yet? Did they think about me? Did they wonder if I was alive? If their grandson was healthy? Or had they successfully erased us the way you delete a typo? A mistake that marred an otherwise perfect document? Jacob had tried to find me. He'd sent messages through Sarah, who'd finally responded to my Facebook message. He wants to know if you're okay. He says mom cries at night, and dad won't let anyone say your name. I wanted to be angry about my mother's tears. She'd stood there. She'd let him throw me out. She'd chosen her husband over her daughter and grandson. But anger took energy I didn't have. I was too busy surviving to hate properly. 4 months in, I'd saved $437. It might as well have been $4 for all the good it did. First and last month's rent, plus security deposit for even the cheapest apartment, was over $2,000. But I kept saving $20 here, $30 there, hiding it in a tampon box because Kesha said no one steals those. Carla got approved for subsidized housing and left on a Tuesday, promising to keep in touch. She didn't. That was how it worked. When you escaped, you didn't look back. The shelter was a place you survived, not a place you remembered fondly. We were trauma bonded, not friends. Her bed was filled the next day by a 15-year-old named Jessica, whose parents had signed away their rights so her aunt could kick her out legally. She cried for 3 days straight, and I held her baby while she did. Remembering my first nights, the shock of it all. It gets easier, I told her, though I wasn't sure that was true. Didn't get easier. You just got harder. Your skin thickened. Your standards lowered. Your dreams shrunk to fit the space available. But sometimes late at night in that office building, reading those borrowed books while the world slept, I'd allow myself to imagine a different future. One where Ethan and I had our own place. Where I had a job that required my brain instead of just my back. Where I could afford formula without watering it down. Later, it ended with me standing in a community college admissions office. Ethan strapped to my chest, filling out an application for night classes. The woman behind the desk looked at me. 18 years old, homeless, single mother. And I could see her calculating my odds of success. The program's demanding, she said carefully. With a baby. I'll manage, I said, not sure if it was determination or delusion. She stamped my application. Classes start in 2 weeks. Financial aid should cover most of it if you qualify. Walking out, I whispered to Ethan. We're going to build something better. I promise. I had no idea how many times that promise would nearly break me before I could keep it. The community college classroom smelled like whiteboard markers and broken dreams. 23 students crammed into a space meant for 15. Most of us exhausted before the professor even started talking. It was 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, my first introduction to accounting class, and Ethan had kept me up for 36 hours straight with what the free clinic doctor called just colic. Welcome to ACC 101, Professor Martinez said, a middle-aged man whose coffee stains told their own story of exhaustion. Look to your left, now you're right. Statistically, one of those people won't be here by midterms. I didn't look. I couldn't afford to be a statistic. The shelter's emergency childcare only covered my work hours, so I'd had to negotiate with Jessica, the 15-year-old mom who'd taken Carla's bed. She watched Ethan during my classes. I helped her with her GED homework. It was a fragile system that depended on both our babies sleeping at the same time, Jessica not having a breakdown, and me making it back before the shelter's curfew. That first week I failed a quiz. Not just failed, bombed it completely. The numbers that made so much sense when I read them in stolen moments at work scrambled on the page. My hand shook as I wrote my name, exhaustion making everything blurry. Professor Martinez handed back the quizzes the next class. Miss Richardson, see me after. I waited Ethan's car seat at my feet because Jessica had a crisis and couldn't watch him. He was mercifully quiet, probably exhausted from screaming all morning. This isn't going to work if you can't focus, Martinez said, not unkindly, but not gently either. I know. I'm sorry. I don't need apologies. I need to know if you're wasting your time and mine. Something in me snapped. Not angry, just clear. I clean offices 10 hours a night to afford formula. I live in a shelter with 21 other mothers who've been thrown away by everyone who's supposed to love them. I haven't slept more than 2 consecutive hours in 5 months. But I'm here, aren't I? That quiz was my first F in my entire life, and it'll be my last. So no, I'm not wasting anyone's time. He studied me for a long moment, then pulled out a business card. My wife runs a tutoring center. Tell her I sent you. First 5 sessions are free for students with demonstrated financial need. I think you qualify. The tutoring center was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a Chinese restaurant. Mrs. Martinez was nothing like her husband. Soft where he was sharp, patient where he was brisk. She took one look at Ethan and set up a pack and play in the corner. Babies are welcome here, she said. Learning doesn't stop for life. Those sessions saved me. Not just academically, though my grades climbed from that initial F to steady Bs, but mentally. For 2 hours twice a week I was just a student learning debits and credits. Not a homeless teenage mother. One crisis away from complete collapse. The nights got harder before they got easier. Mrs. Harris at the cleaning job had started leaving extra food in the break room. Leftovers from a meeting, she'd say, though the containers looked suspiciously fresh. I'd eat half, save half for breakfast, stretching my food stamps to cover Ethan's formula and diapers with nothing left for myself. One night, cleaning a conference room, I found a presentation still up on the screen. Quarterly financial analysis. I studied it during my break, taking pictures with my phone to review later. The company was hemorrhaging money in their supply chain. Obvious inefficiencies that even I, with 1 semester of accounting, could spot. I left a note, anonymous, in pencil on a post-it. Check your vendor invoicing. You're being double billed on items 3, 7, and 12. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Harris found me. Someone upstairs wants to know who's been leaving notes on the financial reports. My blood went cold. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. They want to offer you an internship. Unpaid because they're cheap. Bastards, but it counts as course credit. You'd work here during the day twice a week doing basic bookkeeping. You interested? Interested? I wanted to cry. Instead I said, I'd need to bring Ethan sometimes. They got a lactation room nobody uses. Set him up in there. The internship meant juggling schedules that would make a circus performer dizzy. Shelter daycare from 8 to 12. Internship from 12 to 4 while Ethan napped in the empty lactation room. Classes from 7 to 10. Cleaning from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Sleep happened in 20-minute increments on buses in break rooms, standing up in the shower sometimes. But the internship led to references. References led to a better job. Part-time bookkeeping for a small construction company owned by Mr. Chin, whose wife I'd helped find a calculation error that saved them $3,000. You're that girl, Mrs. Chin said when I came for the interview. The Richardson girl. Your parents go to my church. I waited for her to throw me out. They're fools, she said instead. When can you start? 6 months into my new life I got a letter. No return address, but I recognized Jacob's handwriting. Inside was a photo. My parents at church standing stiffly while Pastor Harold preached. My mother had aged 5 years. My father's smile looked painted on. Jacob had written on the back. They tell people you moved away for college. I tell people the truth. There was money in the envelope, 5 $20 bills and a note. Mowing lawns after school. Ethan's uncle loves him. I cried so hard that night that Kesha threatened to call a crisis counselor. The construction company job paid enough that I could start dreaming about an apartment. I found a 2-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades, where the landlord didn't ask too many questions if you had first, last, and security in cash. It was $2,800. More money than I'd ever held at once. Took 8 months to save it. 8 months of not buying myself a winter coat, of eating peanut butter on sale rack bread, of walking instead of taking the bus. But Ethan had warm clothes, good formula, the expensive diapers that didn't give him a rash. I'd fail at everything else before I'd fail at that. Carla showed up one night at the shelter, Tyler on her hip, a bruise on her cheek. He found us, she said simply. She'd lost the subsidized apartment when her ex convinced the housing authority she'd violated the lease by letting him visit. It wasn't true, but truth didn't matter when you couldn't afford a lawyer. That night I held her while she cried. Tyler and Ethan playing on the floor with the same 3 toys the shelter had owned since the 90s. I thought I was out, she kept saying. I thought I'd made it. You will, I told her. You'll get out again. How do you know? I didn't. But what else could I say? My grades stayed steady, BS, and the occasional A when the stars aligned, and Ethan slept through the night before an exam. Professor Martinez stopped me after the final. You did well, he said. What's next? Accounting too, if I can afford it. He pulled out a form. Department scholarship. It's not much. Covers 1 class per semester, but you've earned it. I stared at the paper. Why? Because I've taught here 15 years and I've never had a student leave correction notes on random financial reports they found while cleaning offices. You've got a mind for this. Don't waste it. The day I signed the lease on the apartment, Ethan took his first steps. He'd been furniture cruising for weeks in the shelter's common room, but that morning as I was packing our few belongings, he let go of the coffee table and took 3 wobbling steps toward me. Oh my God! Jessica shrieked. He's walking. I caught him before he fell, lifting him up, spinning him around while he giggled. We were moving forward literally and figuratively, one uncertain step at a time. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. No elevator, water stains on the ceiling, and a kitchen so small I could touch both walls with my arms spread. But it had a door that locked, a bathtub Ethan could splash in, a window that looked out on a scraggly tree where birds sometimes sang. It was ours. That first night, I put Ethan to bed in his own room. A closet-sized space that barely fit his crib, but his own room nonetheless. Then I sat on the floor of the empty living room and ate Chinese takeout from the place downstairs. A celebration feast that cost $11 I couldn't really spare. We did it, I whispered to the walls. We actually did it. 2 years. That's how long I managed to avoid my parents completely. 2 years of taking different routes when I had to go near their neighborhood, of shopping at stores I knew they'd never visit, of creating a life in the shadows of my hometown. Then Mrs. Chin promoted me to office manager. And suddenly I was someone. Not much of someone. I still counted pennies and wore thrift store professional clothes, but someone with business cards and a desk and a title that didn't include the word assistant. Ethan was in preschool now, a decent one that accepted childcare vouchers. He was small for his age but fierce, with my hazel eyes and a stubborn streak that came from both sides. He called Mrs. Chin Grandma Chin because she insisted on it, and she brought him Chinese sweets that he hoarded like treasure. I was filing quarterly reports when Mr. Chin came into the office. Face grim. Haley, I need someone I trust to look at something. He handed me a folder. Financial records for the church. My parents' church. Pastor Harold's church. They've asked us to bid on their new community center, but something feels off about their finances. Can you review these? My hand shook as I opened the folder. There it was. My father's signature on several forms. Board of directors. Treasurer. Still trying to prove his worth to God by way of spreadsheets and service. The numbers were wrong. Not obviously, but wrong in a way that made my newly trained eye twitch. Money moving in circles, vanishing into vendor accounts that didn't match actual services. A construction fund that had been almost complete for 3 years. This is... I paused, choosing my words carefully. There are irregularities. Mr. Chin nodded. That's what I thought. We're pulling our bid. That should have been the end of it. But I couldn't stop thinking about those numbers, about Pastor Harold's face that last night when my father chose him over me. I kept copies of everything, studying them at home while Ethan played with blocks. 3 weeks later my doorbell rang at 8 p.m. Nobody visited me except Mrs. Chin, and she always called first. Through the peephole I saw them. Older, grayer, smaller somehow. My parents stood in my hallway like ghosts I'd conjured by thinking too hard. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. My mother's eyes went immediately to Ethan, visible behind me, building a tower out of Legos. Is that? She started. What do you want? My voice came out steadier than I felt. My father cleared his throat. The commanding man who'd thrown me out was gone, replaced by someone who looked tired and desperate. We need to talk to you, please. About what? You made your position clear 2.5 years ago. Things have changed, my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. We made mistakes. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Mistakes? Is that what you call abandoning your daughter and infant grandson? Ethan looked up at my tone. Mama, it's okay, baby. Keep playing. I stepped into the hallway, pulling the door almost closed behind me. You have 2 minutes. My father's Adam's apple bobbed. The church is being audited. There are discrepancies. Harold said. Harold's been arrested. I kept my face neutral despite the satisfaction that flooded through me. And we need someone who understands finances. Someone we can trust. Someone of family. Family. The word tasted like poison. I stopped being family when you changed the locks. My mother flinched. Haley, please. We know we hurt you. Hurt me? You threw me out with a 3-day-old baby in November with no shoes. We were following Harold's guidance, my father said weakly. He said enabling you would stop. I held up my hand. You chose him over me. You chose your reputation over your daughter. Those were your choices, not his. You're right, my mother said suddenly. You're right about all of it. We were cowards. We were cruel. He paused. I miss you. I miss my nephew. Does he look like you? He has my eyes. Your eyes too. Maybe someday I can meet him. Maybe. When you're 18. When it's your choice, not theirs. 2 more years, he said like a promise. After we hung up, I sat in my small living room watching Ethan sleep on the couch where he dozed off during a cartoon. My life looked nothing like I'd planned at 18. No college dorm, no sorority sisters, no easy path padded by parental support. Instead I had this. An apartment with thin walls and noisy neighbors, a job that barely covered the bills, night classes that might eventually lead to a degree, a son who called me mama, like it was the best word in the world. And now, the strange power of being needed by the people who'd thrown me away. They'd come to me broken and desperate, and I'd help them. Not out of love or forgiveness but because I was better than they were, because I could be. Mrs. Chin gave me a raise after the church scandal broke. You handled that with grace, she said. More than they deserved. It wasn't about what they deserved, I replied. It was about who I choose to be. She smiled. That's why you're getting a raise. The raise meant I could stop watering down Ethan's juice. I could buy him new shoes instead of used ones. I could even maybe start saving for something bigger. Our own house someday with a yard where he could play. That evening, as I gave Ethan a bath, he looked up at me with those serious hazel eyes and said, Mama, are you sad? No, baby. Why? Sometimes your face gets sad when you think I'm not looking. I lifted him out of the tub, wrapping him in a towel that had seen better days but was soft from so many washes. Sometimes mamas get sad, but then we see our babies and we remember why we're happy. Why? Because you're my best thing. You're my impossible thing that came true. He giggled as I tickled him dry, and I thought about the title of my story, how my parents walked in and saw the impossible. They'd seen their teenage daughter transformed into someone they needed. They'd seen the grandson they rejected thriving despite them. They'd seen that throwing us out hadn't destroyed us. It had forged us into something stronger. But the real impossible thing wasn't what they saw. It was what I'd built from nothing but determination and the weight of a baby in my arms. It was surviving when everyone expected me to fail. It was becoming someone's entire world when my own world had collapsed. The story was far from over. There would be more confrontations, more reckonings, more moments when the past and present collided. But that night, as I tucked Ethan into his toddler bed in his tiny room with its peeling paint and drafty window, I knew we'd already won the only battle that mattered. We'd survived. We'd thrived. We'd become impossible. Love you to the moon, mama, Ethan mumbled, already half asleep. Love you to the stars and back, baby. And in that moment, in our small apartment with its water stains and creaky floors, we had everything. The second time my parents appeared at my door, they brought leverage. It was a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after I'd helped untangle them from Pastor Harold's fraud. Ethan was practicing writing his name at the kitchen table, crooked letters that looked like drunk caterpillars, when the knock came. Through the peephole I saw them. My parents again, but this time with a man in a suit. Lawyer, my instinct screamed. I opened the door, the chain still on. I told you not to come back. We need to discuss your grandmother's estate, the lawyer said, producing a business card through the gap. I'm William Thornton. Your parents have hired me to resolve some irregularities. My grandmother. She'd been dead 4 years now, gone just before my 15th birthday. The mention of her name turned a key in my chest. What irregularities? My father shifted uncomfortably. Can we come in? Please, Haley. This affects you. I looked back at Ethan, absorbed in his letters. Mrs. Chin wasn't expecting him for another hour. She'd started taking him for dinner once a week, teaching him Mandarin and spoiling him with dumplings. 10 minutes, I said, unhooking the chain. They filed in, my mother's eyes immediately going to Ethan. He looked up, curious but unafraid. Ethan, go play in your room for a bit, okay? Okay, mama. He gathered his crayons carefully, like I taught him. As he passed my parents, my mother made an aborted movement like she wanted to touch him. I stepped between them. Once his door closed, I crossed my arms. Talk. The lawyer pulled out documents. Your grandmother established a trust in your name when you were born. It was meant to mature when you turned 18, providing roughly $50,000 for your education and establishment of independent life. The room tilted. Your grandmother was discreet about her assets, my mother said quietly. She had investments we didn't know about, life insurance we didn't expect. The trust was terminated 2 weeks after your 18th birthday, the lawyer continued. The funds were transferred to an account that was then closed. The signature on the termination papers appears to be yours, but I never signed anything. My voice came out sharp, clear. I turned 18 2 months before Ethan was born. I was hiding morning sickness and trying to finish high school. I never knew about any trust. The lawyer and I both looked at my parents. My mother was studying her hands. My father was staring at the water stain on my ceiling. The thing is, my father said slowly, Harold said you'd need guidance, that a teenage mother with that much money would make poor choices. He suggested we protect it for you. You stole from me. The words dropped like stones. You stole $50,000 from me, and then threw me out with nothing. We were going to give it back, my mother said weakly, when you were older, more stable. I was sleeping on park benches. I was bleeding through my socks walking to the shelter. I diluted my baby's formula because I couldn't afford enough. My voice rose with each word. And you had $50,000 of my money. Harold had control of it, my father said. It went into the church's investment fund. He said it would grow. That when you came back repentant. Repentant. I laughed ugly and sharp. For what? For being raped. The word hung in the air like a blade. My parents went white. What? My mother whispered. Nathan Turner didn't seduce me. He got me drunk at his party. I stopped breathing hard. I never said it out loud, not even to Carla. Said no several times. But you never asked, did you? You just assumed I was a sinner who got what she deserved. My mother made a sound like something breaking. My father sat down heavily on my second-hand couch. We need to focus on recovering the funds, the lawyer said after a moment, clearly uncomfortable. The signature on the trust termination is demonstrably forged. We can pursue criminal charges. Against who? I asked. Harold's already going to prison. My parents. I looked at them. These strangers who'd raised me. Did you forge my signature? Harold did, my father said quietly. We watched him do it. We thought we were protecting you. You thought you were punishing me. No one denied it. The lawyer cleared his throat. There's a paper trail. The money went from the trust to the church fund to something called Maple Suppliers LLC. I know about Maple Suppliers. It's a shell company. The township treasurer is part of it. I pulled out my own files, the ones I'd copied. I've already traced most of it. The lawyer looked impressed despite himself. You've done forensic accounting on this. I've done survival accounting on this. There's a difference. Mama. Ethan's voice came from his doorway. Can I come out? Yes, baby. He emerged, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur, and climbed into my lap. 3.5 years old, and already my protector, glaring at the strangers who'd made his mama upset. This is Ethan, I said, daring them to say something. My mother's eyes filled with tears. He looks just like Jacob at that age. You don't get to cry, I told her. You don't get to mourn the grandson you threw away. We made a mistake, she whispered. No, a mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. You made a choice. You chose your reputation and your pastor over your daughter and grandson. Now you're here because you need my help, not because you've suddenly developed a conscience. The lawyer shuffled papers. If we can recover the funds with interest and penalties, it could be substantial. Enough to what? Make up for 3 years of abandonment? Pay back the nights I went hungry so my baby could eat. Enough to secure your son's future, he said simply. That stopped me. I looked down at Ethan, who was playing with the buttons on my shirt, oblivious to the weight of adult failures. What do you need from me? I asked. Your cooperation, testimony, documentation. The lawyer pulled out more papers. And decisions about prosecution. I wanted it all in writing. Every penny that was taken, where it went, who knew what and when. I stood Ethan on my hip. And I want a full accounting of my grandmother's entire estate, not just the trust. My parents exchanged glances. What else are you hiding? I asked. There was a letter, my mother said finally, from your grandmother for you when you turned 18. Harold said it would only confuse things. You kept her letter from me. My voice went quiet, which was worse than yelling. My father pulled an envelope from his jacket. Yellowed, my name in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. Still sealed. I took it with my free hand, holding it like it might explode. Get out. Mr. Thornton, you can contact me directly. Don't bring them again. They filed out, my mother casting one last look at Ethan. He waved, innocent and friendly, and she sobbed as the door closed. I didn't open the letter for 3 days. It sat on my kitchen counter like an unexploded bomb while I went through the motions. Work, Ethan's preschool pickup, dinner, bath, bedtime stories. But at night, after Ethan was asleep, I'd stare at it, afraid of what truths my grandmother had tried to tell me. Finally, on Saturday afternoon while Ethan napped, I opened it. My dearest Haley, if you're reading this, you're 18 and I'm gone. I hope your parents gave this to you with joy, but I fear they might not. Your father, my son, has always been weak in the face of stronger personalities. Your mother means well, but chooses peace over principle. I've left you money, enough to make your own choices, whatever they may be. But more importantly, I've left you truth. Check the loose brick in the basement wall of the old hardware store, behind the paint supplies. I've left something there that your parents must never find. It's about your real inheritance, not money but knowledge. Be brave, my darling girl. Braver than your parents. The women in our family have always been the strong ones, even when we had to hide it. Trust Mr. Winslow at Winslow and Associates. He has documents for you. All my love, Grandma Eleanor. The hardware store. The family business that was now in foreclosure, that my parents were desperately trying to save. I'd have to go back to my childhood, to the place where I'd played hide and seek between aisles of nails and screws. I called Mrs. Chin. Can you watch Ethan tonight? I need to do something. Of course. Everything okay? I'm about to find out. The store looked smaller than I remembered, darker. The windows were papered over now, foreclosure signs taped to the door, but I still had my key. The one thing I'd kept from my old life, hidden in my jewelry box like a talisman. The lock was stiff, but it turned. The alarm had been disconnected months ago, probably when they stopped paying bills. I used my phone's flashlight to navigate through the familiar aisles, now mostly empty, dust dancing in the beam. The basement door creaked like a horror movie. Each step down felt like descending into my past. The paint supplies were still there, cans no one would ever buy now. I ran my fingers along the bricks until I found it. One that wiggled. Behind it, a metal box wrapped in plastic. Inside the box, photographs, documents, and another letter. The photograph stopped my heart. My grandmother, young, maybe 20, standing next to a man who wasn't my grandfather. She was holding a baby, smiling but sad. On the back, in pencil, Eleanor and Thomas with baby Richard, 1977. Richard. My father. The documents were adoption papers, legally stamped. My father had been adopted at 6 months old by the man I'd known as my grandfather. My grandmother's first husband, Thomas, had died in Vietnam 3 months before my father was born. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the bank statements. Accounts in my grandmother's maiden name, Eleanor Foster, that showed deposits from a trust, A military widow's pension that had been invested wisely, properties in other towns, stocks, bonds. An empire built quietly while she played the beautiful small-town wife. The second letter was shorter. Haley, if you're reading this, you're looking for truth. Your grandfather never knew about Thomas or the money. He was a good man but traditional. He wouldn't have understood that I needed something that was just mine. Pastor Harold knows. He's been blackmailing me for years, threatening to tell your grandfather and your father. I've been paying him to keep silent. But I'm dying now, and secrets die with us unless we choose otherwise. The real money isn't in the trust they know about. Check with Winslow. Account number 7,834,521. Password. Thomas 1977. Harold will try to take everything if he learns about this. Don't let him. It's yours. All of it. The strong women's inheritance, passed down despite the men who would control us. Burn this after reading. I didn't burn it. I photographed everything, then put it all back except for one photo of young Eleanor. She looked like me, I realized. Same. Stubborn chin. Same eyes that had seen too much too young. Mr. Winslow's home address was in the phone book. Yes, he still had a phone book listing. His house smelled like pipe tobacco and old books, and he answered the door in a cardigan that had seen better decades. Ms. Richardson, he said, unsurprised. But also evidence. Evidence that my parents hadn't just stolen my trust fund. They tried to steal so much more. Evidence that Pastor Harold's crimes went deeper than anyone knew. My phone rang. Jacob, Haley. I overheard Mom and Dad talking. They said something about Grandma's money, about Harold knowing something. What's going on, Jake? I paused, choosing my words. Did you know Dad was adopted? Silence. Then, what? There's more to this story than anyone's told us. Can you get to the hardware store tomorrow? Alone. It's in foreclosure. I know. Can you? Yeah, I'll figure it out. After I hung up, I made a decision. I called William Thornton, the lawyer. I want to buy the hardware store, I said. Cash offer. And I want to hire you. Not my parents to help me bury Pastor Harold so deep he'll need a ladder to see hell. Miss Richardson, that's? I have the money. I have evidence. What I need is someone who knows how to use both. I'm listening. I talked for an hour, laying out everything I'd found. The hidden accounts, the blackmail, the attempted theft. By the end, he was practically salivating. This is significant. We're not just talking about recovering your trust fund anymore. We're talking about racketeering, extortion, potentially murder by coercion if we can prove the stress contributed to your grandmother's death. I want Harold destroyed. But my parents. I paused, thinking of Jacob. They're victims too, even if they're also culprits. I want them to face consequences but not prison. You're more generous than they deserve. No. I'm practical. My brother doesn't deserve to lose everything because they're weak and stupid. The next morning I met Jacob at the hardware store. He'd grown tall, almost 6 feet, with the awkward limbs of a teenager not yet comfortable in his body. When he hugged me, I smelled my father's aftershave and had to fight not to pull away. I've missed you so much, he said into my hair. Everything's been wrong since you left. Since they threw me out, I corrected gently. I showed him everything. The photos, the documents, the truth about our father's birth, our grandmother's secret empire. He sat on the dusty floor and cried for the grandmother we'd lost, for the family we'd never really been, for the lies that had shaped us. How could they? He kept asking. Because they're cowards. Because believing Harold was easier than thinking for themselves. Because throwing me out was simpler than facing their own failures. But you have a baby. They threw out their own grandson. They threw out their daughter first. Ethan was just collateral damage. He looked at the bank statement again. You're rich now. We are rich, I corrected. You think I keep Grandma's money from you? Half of this is yours when you turn 18. But she left it to you. She left it to the strong one. But you're strong too, Jake. You called me. You slipped me money. You chose truth over comfort. That's strength. We sat in the basement of our family's dying business, surrounded by the evidence of years of lies, and planned how to build something better from the ruins. The courtroom smelled like fear and furniture polish. I sat in the witness box, my hand steady on the Bible, even though I hadn't believed in God since the night my parents chose him over me. Across the room, Pastor Harold sat in an orange jumpsuit that made his skin look sallow. He'd lost weight, his collarbones sharp beneath the fabric. Good. State your name for the record, the prosecutor said. Haley Richardson. Miss Richardson, can you identify the document on the screen? It was my signature, or rather the forgery of it, blown up large enough to see every hesitation in the pen strokes where Harold had tried to copy my handwriting. That's a forged version of my signature on trust termination papers. How can you be certain it's forged? Because I was 6 months pregnant and hiding in my childhood bedroom when that was supposedly signed. I never knew the trust existed until 3 months ago. Harold's lawyer, young, nervous, court-appointed, stood up. Objection. The witness can't claim ignorance of something then claim certainty about. I can claim, I interrupted, looking directly at Harold, That the man my parents trusted more than their own daughter stole $50,000 from me while I was sleeping in a shelter with my newborn son. The judge, an older black woman with eyes that missed nothing, said, "The witness will refrain from editorializing." Objection overruled. Continue. The prosecutor pulled up more documents. My grandmother's hidden accounts. The blackmail payments meticulously documented in her careful handwriting. The shell company Harold had created. The web of financial manipulation that had trapped my family for years. Can you explain what you discovered about your grandmother's estate? I took a breath. In the gallery, my parents sat rigid, my mother clutching my father's hand. Jacob was beside them, having gotten special permission to miss school. I focused on him as I spoke. My grandmother Eleanor was widowed in 1976 when her first husband died in Vietnam. She was pregnant with my father. She remarried my grandfather and never told anyone about the death benefits and pension she received. She invested that money secretly, building a portfolio worth nearly $1 million. Gasps from the gallery. My father's face went gray. Pastor Harold discovered this through his position at the township office. He blackmailed my grandmother for years, threatening to reveal that my father was adopted, that his whole identity was built on lies. She paid him to protect my father from the truth. Objection. Harold's lawyer stood. Speculation about. I have the receipts, I said calmly. Canceled checks, wire transfers. 12 years of payments increasing near her death as Harold got greedy. The prosecutor introduced each piece of evidence. I'd organized them chronologically, a story told in numbers. Here was $5,000 when I was 7. Here was $10,000 the year I turned 13. Here was $25,000 2 months before she died, when she was too weak to fight anymore. What happened after your grandmother's death? Pastor Harold convinced my parents that any money I inherited would enable my sin. When I got pregnant at 18, he used their fear and shame to manipulate them into giving him control over my trust fund. But that wasn't enough. He wanted the hidden accounts too. How do you know this? He tried to access them 847 times over 3 years. I pulled out the login records Mr. Winslow had provided, always from the church IP address. Sometimes at 3 a.m. He had my social security number. My parents gave him that. But not the password. What was the password? Thomas, 1977. My grandmother's first husband and the year my father was born. A secret Harold could never guess because he never knew the whole truth, only enough to cause pain. Harold was scribbling furiously on a legal pad, passing notes to his lawyer. I watched him with the detachment of someone observing a snake in a cage. Miss Richardson, how did the defendant's actions affect you personally? This was the hard part. I looked at Ethan sitting with Mrs. Chin in the back row. She dressed him in his best outfit, the one she bought him for Chinese New Year. He waved when he saw me looking. I was 18, pregnant and terrified. My parents, under Harold's influence, threw me out with my 3-day-old baby. In November, I had no money, no coat, no shoes. I walked 3 miles to a shelter while bleeding from childbirth. I diluted my baby's formula because I couldn't afford enough. I worked 10-hour night shifts scrubbing toilets while my newborn slept in shelter care. All while $50,000 of my money sat in Harold's accounts. I paused. And if you'd had that money, I could have afforded an apartment, healthcare, food, maybe even college. I could have kept my dignity. Harold's lawyer cross-examined me for 2 hours, trying to find inconsistencies. But I'd lived with these numbers for months now. Traced every penny, memorized every transaction. The truth is easier to remember than lies. Isn't it true you were a troubled teenager? Pregnant out of wedlock. I was raped. The word echoed in the courtroom. Nathan Turner assaulted me at a party. My parents never asked what happened. They just assumed I was the sinner Harold told them I was. That's not. There's no police report. Because I was 18 and terrified, and my parents were already calling me a slut. Would you have reported it? The lawyer retreated. Nathan had been subpoenaed but hadn't shown. His family had money for lawyers. Lawyers who'd advised him that attending would open him to questions he didn't want to answer. His absence said everything. My mother took the stand next, tears streaming before she even sat down. Mrs. Richardson, did you know about the trust fund for your daughter? Yes. Did you participate in terminating it? Harold said it was for her own good. He said giving money to a teenage mother would be enabling sin. He said God wanted us to teach her consequences. So you watched him forge her signature. My mother's voice broke. Yes. And then you threw her out. Harold said. He said if we showed mercy we'd be weak. Like Abraham and Isaac, we had to be willing to sacrifice. Abraham didn't actually sacrifice Isaac, I said, too loud. The judge gave me a warning look. My mother looked at me directly for the first time. I know that now. God stopped Abraham, but no one stopped us. My father's testimony was worse, because he tried to justify it. He talked about disappointment, about shame, about the family's reputation. He mentioned prayer and guidance and following spiritual leadership. Not once did he mention love. Mr. Richardson, the prosecutor asked, when your daughter stood on your porch with a 3-day-old baby, what did you feel? I felt righteous, he admitted. And now he looked at Harold, then at me, then at Ethan. Damned. Jacob wasn't supposed to testify, but I'd fought for it. He had evidence no one else did. A recording on his phone from that night. I couldn't sleep, he told the court. I heard the yelling and started recording because I thought someday Haley might need proof that it really happened, that she didn't imagine how bad it was. The prosecutor played the recording. My father's voice, harsh and unforgiving. Get out of my house. My mother's sobs. My own voice, younger and desperate. Please, just tonight. He's only 3 days old. The baby crying. Ethan, unnamed then, unknown, unwanted by everyone but me. And then Harold's voice, which no one had mentioned before. Stand firm, Richard. Cast out the sin before it spreads. I'll handle the financial matters. God will provide for the righteous. He'd been there in the house, watching as they threw us out. The courtroom was silent after the recording ended. Even Harold's lawyer looked sick. The defense rests, he said quietly. During the recess I stood outside, letting the February air cool my burning face. My parents approached, my father clearing his throat. Don't, I said. Whatever you're about to say, don't. We just wanted. You wanted to feel better. You wanted absolution. You wanted me to say I forgive you so you can sleep at night. I turned to face them. I don't forgive you. I never will. The best I can offer is that I won't let your cruelty define my son's life. He's our grandson, my mother whispered. No. He's Mrs. Chin's honorary grandson. He's Carla's nephew. He's loved by people who earned the right to love him. You're strangers who share some DNA. The verdict came back in 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, embezzlement, extortion, conspiracy. The civil suit would follow. But the criminal verdict meant Harold would never manipulate another family. As they let him out, he stopped near my seat. Your grandmother was a slut too, he hissed. That's where you get it from. My grandmother was a survivor, I replied. That's where I get it from. The hardware store reopened on a Thursday in May, 2 days after Ethan's 4th birthday. I gutted it down to the bones and rebuilt it as something new. Willow House, a resource center for single parents. Where hammers once hung, now there were computers for job applications. Where paint cans had gathered dust, now there was a children's library. The basement where I'd found my grandmother's secrets was now a quiet room for nursing mothers. The sign over the door read, Willow House, where new stories begin. In memory of Eleanor Foster Richardson, grandmother, survivor, secret keeper. I'd invited my parents, not because I'd forgiven them, but because Jacob had asked, and because I wanted them to see what I'd built from their abandonment. They stood on the sidewalk like uncertain ghosts, dressed in their church clothes, even though it was Thursday. My mother held a gift bag that trembled in her hands. My father kept checking his watch, a nervous tic he'd developed since the trial. You can come in, I called from the doorway. It's a public space. The inside smelled like fresh paint and hope. Carla was there, Tyler playing with blocks in the corner. She'd gotten her own apartment 6 months ago, but volunteered here twice a week. Paying it forward, she called it. Mrs. Chin had donated the furniture, strong-arming her business contacts into contributing for my grandson's mother, she'd said, which carried weight in our small town's Chinese business community. This is impressive, my father said, looking around. It's necessary, I corrected. Do you know how many young mothers get thrown out every year? How many grandparents choose their pride over their grandchildren? He flinched. Good. Ethan ran up, wearing the cape Mrs. Chin had made him. Mama, can I show them my reading corner? I knelt down. These are the people I told you about. The ones who were lost. He studied them solemnly. Are they found now? I don't know, baby. Why don't you ask them? He walked over to my parents, his cape fluttering. Are you found? My mother dropped to her knees, tears streaming. No, sweetheart. We're still very lost. That's okay, Ethan said, patting her shoulder. Mama says being lost just means you're still looking for the right way. She was lost once too, but then I helped her find the way. You did? My father asked, his voice rough. She says I'm her North Star. He pointed to the ceiling where I had painted stars. Like those, but better 'cause I'm real. Ethan, why don't you go show Tyler your new book? I suggested. He ran off and my parents stood there, destroyed by the kindness of the child they'd rejected. He doesn't know, my mother said. He doesn't know we're the grandparents who threw him away. No, he doesn't. He knows there are people who hurt Mama a long time ago, but that Mama got strong anyway. That's all he needs to know. Jacob arrived after school, taller still, 17 now, and looking more like our grandmother than either parent. He'd been accepted to State University with a full scholarship, academic, not financial need-based, since his trust fund from Grandma Eleanor would cover expenses. The place looks amazing, he said, hugging me. He'd become a hugger since we'd reconnected, as if trying to make up for 3 years of lost contact. Want to see your office? I asked. My what? I led him to a small room overlooking the street. Every resource center needs a tutoring program. You'll run it summers and breaks. Minimum wage to start, but it's yours if you want it, Haley. He looked around the room at the desk I'd already set up, the shelves waiting for books. Yes. God, yes. My parents stood in the doorway, watching their children plan a future that didn't include them. We sold the house, my father said suddenly. After the civil judgment, we had to. The civil suit had awarded me $500,000 in damages. The original $50,000 plus interest, penalties, and compensation for suffering. My parents' insurance and house sale had covered it. They lived in a small apartment now, the kind with thin walls and noisy neighbors. The kind I'd lived in. I'm sorry you lost your home, I said, and meant it. I wasn't cruel enough to celebrate their suffering, just indifferent to it. It was never a home after you left, my mother said quietly. Just a house where we'd made the worst mistake of our lives. The opening ceremony was at 2 p.m. Local press showed up. The story of Pastor Harold's trial had been big news, and my transformation of the hardware store into a resource center was the kind of redemption story small towns loved. I stood at the podium, Ethan on my hip, and looked out at the crowd. There were mothers from the shelter, social workers who'd helped me, Mrs. Harris from the cleaning company who'd given me my first chance. Professor Martinez and his wife were there, having donated the computers. Mr. and Mrs. Chin sat in the front row like proud grandparents. 4 years ago, I began. I stood on a sidewalk with a 3-day-old baby and nothing else. No money, no family, no shoes. Just a child who needed me to be stronger than I knew how to be. I caught my parents' eyes. They were standing in the back trying to be invisible. The system isn't built for teenage mothers. It's built to punish us, shame us, make us disappear. But we don't disappear. We survive. We work night shifts and take day classes. We water down formula and skip meals. We build. My mother approached the podium after my speech, clutching a small gift bag. Can I give this to Ethan? It's a book. Just a book. Her face was ravaged by guilt and sleepless nights. You can leave it at the front desk. I'll decide if he gets it. That's fair, she whispered. More than fair. Fair would be you never seeing him. This is mercy. Learn the difference. My father joined her. That afternoon, a young woman came in, 17, 8 months pregnant, eyes hollow with the particular exhaustion of being unwanted. Her parents had given her a week to figure it out or leave. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I sat beside her, remembering another girl who'd once thought the same thing. First, I said, we're going to make sure you have shoes that fit. Then we'll handle the rest. She looked confused until I explained about the night I'd walked to the shelter in bloody socks. How that small cruelty had taught me that dignity starts with the details. As I helped her fill out assistance forms, I thought about my parents probably watching the news segment again, torturing themselves with what they'd thrown away. I thought about Harold in prison, his power stripped away with his freedom. I thought about my grandmother, whose secrets had saved me years after her death. But mostly, I thought about Ethan's laugh echoing through the center, about Jacob's excitement for the tutoring program, about Mrs. Chin bringing dumplings for lunch, about Carla teaching parenting classes in the same basement where I'd found the truth. This was the impossible thing my parents had walked in to see. Not just my success, but my refusal to let their failure define it. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just a resource center, but a monument to every young mother who'd been told she was worthless and proved the world wrong. The story could have ended there, with neat lessons about resilience and redemption. But real stories don't end. They just keep going. One impossible day at a time, one young mother at a time, one child laughing at a time. And somewhere in town, in a small apartment with thin walls, 2 people who'd chosen their reputation over their daughter were learning what I'd known all along. Some choices can't be undone. Some doors, once closed, never open again. And sometimes the most impossible thing isn't surviving being thrown away. It's learning to live with having done the throwing. If your family threw you out at your lowest moment, would you save them at theirs?